So I am Kristen Moore. I'm a project manager here at Armor Protective Packaging, and it's my voice and sometimes my face that you're going to see today for the next 30 minutes. And my co-host today is our industrial sales manager, Ryan. And he's going to be manning that question box that we just practiced. And don't worry, only myself and Ryan can see what's written in that question box. So anytime you have a question for us, feel free just to type it right into that box and Ryan will get an answer to you. So for some of you on this webinar, you might be very familiar with Armor, but for others, you might need a little introduction or reintroduction to Armor. So at Armor, while we manufacture rust prevention and rust removal products, we know that our purpose is to protect your brand, your customer's brand, your parts, your customers' parts, and most importantly, your reputation. And how we do it? Well, the very first bullet point on your screen, which is VCI, or Vapor Corrosion Inhibiting Nanotechnology. And we'll talk about VCI a little bit more in the webinar, but I also want to point out that second bullet point from the bottom of the screen, which many of you might find most interesting. Over 90% of Fortune 500 industries, well, they rely on Armor. All right, so here's how we are breaking down this webinar this morning. First, we are going to talk about the nuts and bolts of VCI. Then we're going to talk about buyer beware, or what I like to call our top 10 on why it pays to know where your VCI comes from. Then we're going to watch a little expose or video on the real cost of rust, or the truth that you can't afford to ignore. And those are our three categories. So let's get started with the first one, the nuts and bolts of VCI. All right, so if you have a customer that works with metal or sells something that's metal, they know this slide. In order to have corrosion or rust, you only need these three things. You need metal, and then you need air, and you need moisture. So how do you protect it? Well, that's using VCI packaging. So some of you might be experts already in VCI, but others might need a little refresher course in, well, what is VCI? So let me lay it out to you in pretty simple terms. If you look right at the middle of your screen, that represents VCI, which is that vapor corrosion inhibiting nanotechnology. In order for VCI to work, you need a carrier. So on the left-hand side of your screen in this image, the carrier is craft paper. And that craft paper is coated, sometimes people use the term impregnated with VCI, and then what you have is Armor wrap, or craft paper impregnated with VCI. You can put your metal part right into it, wrap it around that metal, and it prevents rust. Now here's another example for you. I've swapped out craft paper as the carrier, and right in the middle of your screen is poly that's extruded with VCI. Same concept. You take your metal part, you put it into that poly bag, and it prevents rust. Now, in order to understand how it prevents rust, this slide really gives you a great visual. So VCI is volatile, which just means that it wants to leave the carrier that it's in, so it wants to leave the poly, and it's attracted to the metal part. So those little white dots on your screen right now, they represent the VCI. They leave the carrier, they're attracted to that metal part, and they put a barrier around the metal. And that barrier keeps out what we talked about earlier, the moisture and the oxygen and the contaminants. Now you might be asking yourself, well, how thick is that barrier? Well, if you look at the left-hand side of your screen, VCI is 4 to 6 nanometers thick. We're talking nanotechnology. If you want to compare that all the way to the right-hand side of your screen, a single sheet of paper is 100,000 nanometers thick. That's how clean, safe, and easy VCI is to use. But this is something I want you to remember. Not all VCIs are the same. And we'll talk about that a lot. But again, you might want to jot it down. Not all VCIs are the same. And here is a great analogy that I like to use. I'm interested in buying a used car and I call up the used car dealership and I say, hey, I want this car. And the person on the other end of the phone says, perfect, I've got the car you want. And hey, I put new tires on it. And you go, you buy the car and say, I drive off. and about 7,000 or 8,000 miles later, those tire treads are shot. And in that moment, I realized, ooh, there is a difference between a generic tire and a good pair of tires, like Goodyear or Michelin brand. And the same is true about VCI. Not all VCIs are the same. Which leads then to the bulk of this webinar today, which is, well then, why? What are the 10 reasons why you want to make sure you buy your rust prevention VCI from a known, credible source? So we're going to walk through all 10 reasons right now. All right, the first one is that you want to be able to protect your reputation. I love this quote. It takes 20 years to build a reputation and 5 minutes to ruin it. And if you think about that, you'll do things differently. So if you are a distributor that buys and resells or distributes products for a living, you know that your reputation is an integral part of your offering. You don't typically make any products, so you rely on companies like us to produce products and have quality control. And vapor corrosion inhibitors, or VCI, they are performance products. They perform an important and necessary function to prevent rust on metal in shipping and storage. So we say, don't put your business in the hands of an unknown product or company just to save a buck. Number two is you want to protect your customer's reputation. So not only your reputation, but your customer's reputation. And as a distributor, many of you know, perhaps the best way to protect your own reputation is by assuring you're protecting your customer's reputation. So if you look at your screen right now, companies such as Caterpillar and Ford and Volvo and GM and GE, they spend millions of dollars each year to market their companies. And the last thing that they want is for a customer to open up one of their products and have it be covered in rust. And so because of that, we want to make sure you're working with reputable rust preventative VCI brand, so not to put your customer's reputation on the line. All right, number three, who are you going to call? And the answer is not Ghostbusters. We'd like to say the answer is Armor. So rust happens. It's as sure as death and taxes. And we're confident that even old Ben Franklin would agree if he knew how difficult it was to ship a load of steel automotive components from Mexico to the USA in the springtime. When that frantic call comes in from a customer and you're using an unknown VCI source from a low-priced extruder, who's going to make the long walk with you down the yellow caution-taped plant center aisle to inspect the bins of rusty parts? Well, it's us. With Armor, we stand behind our products and technology and provide technical support each step of the way. So if right now this kind of hits home to you and you have a customer who's experiencing a rust issue and you want to walk through that rust issue with your technical team, you want to call us, all you need to do is write in that question box that we practiced earlier to Ryan. You can write rust issue. I have a customer with a rust issue. He'll connect you with the right member of our technical team so we can be there to support you. All right, number four is in the secret sauce. I cannot stress this enough during this webinar. I mentioned it earlier with the tire analogy. No two VCI formulas are the same. And with an unknown VCI source, the chemistry isn't a secret. It's just unknown what's exactly in the product. Armor VCI formulations are, in fact, what we like to call our secret sauce. But our technology and our formulations, they're backed with years of research, years of development, years of testing. And with all the new global standards, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and specifications to navigate, the best bet is to rely on a company that's producing their own proprietary VCI formulation for over 40 years. When you need your REACH document or health and safety approvals from a key OEM, well, Armor has got you covered. And we've got you covered because of number five, who's minding the P's and Q's? So we say who's minding the P's and Q's because with unknown or generic VCI sources, who is responsible for the product performance and quality? When you don't put your name on it, It's easier to treat it as a commodity. And at Armor, we are fanatical about performance and quality because for us, our reputation's on the line. Now, this is about as scientific as we are going to get today, reason number 6. And I'm going to give you just the layman's overview of vapor first contact, the long and short of it. But if you want to go deeper on this, then all you need to do is write in that question box to Ryan. You can even write just the word vapor. He'll know exactly what you're talking about. Vapor first contact, just vapor in there. And we can talk about your specific rust needs when it comes to vapor first contact. So here's the slide again. But this is something that I didn't mention earlier when talking about VCI. Did you know that not all VCI provides good vapor phase protection? Meaning, if the metal isn't touching or close to that VCI, rust prevention won't be achieved. And did you know that some VCIs don't work well when they are in direct contact with the metal? So the opposite. Or there's VCIs out there that some work quickly, but then they fizzle out over the long haul. So at Armor, our VCI uses mixed inhibitor technology. So again, our VCI uses mixed inhibitor technology to ensure both superior contact and vapor phase corrosion and the ability to vaporize a space quickly, but have lasting effects for years of protection. So again, because of the type of webinar this is, we aren't going to really dive deep into the science of VCI, but if you need to learn more, this kind of piques your interest and you say, wait a second, like I need to have vapor corrosion protection, or maybe, no, I need to make sure that my VCI works when the metal is touching the VCI. Then all you need to do is write into that question box to Ryan, vapor versus contact, and we can talk with you about your specific rust issues. All right, reason number 7 are worldwide standards. As many of you know, when companies ship internationally, they have to meet worldwide standards like REACH and ECA and CPL standards for chemical content and labeling. And companies such as Toyota, who we work with, they adopted the European Union's chemical and labeling regulations several years before they were even required by international law. And with an unknown VCI source, you run the risk of either violating these regulations or having to do extra labeling or paperwork if they're using chemicals on the reportable substance list. With Armor products, you can be assured that our chemistry meets worldwide standards, including those for the European Union and Japan. All right, here's a great quote. So reason number 8, we like to say, to a man with a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And what I mean by this is, if your supplier only sells generic VCI film, the only recommendation for rust problems is going to be generic VCI film. And doesn't limited options mean limited answers for your rust prevention needs? And as a distributor, your job is to supply your customers with what they need. But often, they're relying on your expertise to guide them through what that is and who they should rely on. And at Armor, we've worked hard to have just the right mix of VCI products. So if you look at your screen right now, you can see what I talked about earlier, which I like to say in layman terms, what you're looking at are just different carriers of VCI technology. So you can see that craft paper, you can see poly, you can see stretch, you can see desiccant, you can see rust prevention in a liquid form, which is dry coat rust preventative spray. We've made all of these clean, safe, and easy rust prevention solutions to get the job done right. And if you want this picture and you want to know the Armor family of products, all you need to do is type that in the question box to Ryan and he will get it sent over to you. All right, reason number 9 is you can't teach experience. For at Armor, we have been eradicating rust for over 40 years now. And we've seen just about every rust application or challenge, and we have the lab testing and real life success stories to back up whatever solutions you're presented with. So if you're looking for a specific type of lab test, if you are looking for a specific what we call rustimonial, which is a testimonial from a customer about either a product, so maybe you want a testimonial about Armor Wrap or Armor Poly, or maybe you want a testimonial about a specific application. Feel free to type that in that question box to Ryan and say, hey, do you have any testimonials on this, whatever Rust problem that you're facing right now, and we'll get that sent over to you. And then reason number 10, I touched on this, but just to continue with the ability to have worldwide support. At Armor, again, we've said it, rust happens. Whether it is poor preventative maintenance on the metalworking fluids, workers not wearing gloves to prevent contact corrosion from acidity, there are times that rust happens at the end of a shipment, and it's important to find and know the root cause so it doesn't happen again. And with Armor, we've got you covered literally across the world. Whether you need us to track down a rusty shipment or assist you with a trial, Armor has global locations in over 25 countries around the world. So we're there around the world, ready to take the work out of your workday. So now that we've covered all 10 reasons why you want to make sure you buy your rust prevention from a known credible source, let's talk about the real issue here. The issue that impacts every sales manager, every purchasing team, every part of your organization, and that is money. And the best way I can describe to you the cost of rust is something that we call, and you might have seen on a previous Armor webinar, the rust iceberg. So for a rust iceberg, what we are saying is just like a real iceberg. It's not what's sticking out of the water that sinks the ship. It's everything underneath that sinks the ship. And the one that we're going to talk about in particular, and you're going to learn a little bit more about, is the 8D meeting. And instead of having to listen to my voice for the next 5 minutes, what we have for you is a real cost of cheap VCI video. Now I'm going to go ahead and play it for you. I just want to let you know, as I practice this webinar, for a few moments, your screen is going to go black. You're not going to hear anything, and then I promise you that video is going to pop up and start playing. If for some reason, after a couple of minutes, you can't hear it, please type in the question box. I can't hear the video.
The real cost of cheap VCI. Meet Rusty. The company that he works for makes metal parts. Every year it's the same thing. Rusty's company is always trying to find new ways to save money. And this year, Rusty had the idea of saving money on his rust preventative vapor corrosion inhibitors. Rusty figured that they manufacture 30,000 parts per week at a cost of $1 per part for a total of $30,000 worth of parts. For years, Rusty's company has relied on Armor Protective Packaging's VCI, that's vapor corrosion inhibitors, to protect their parts from rust. Armor recommended the following for packaging their parts. For every 100 parts packaged, there's one Armor Poly VCI bag priced at $4.20 and one sheet of Armor Wrap paper at $1 per sheet, which brings the total piece priced to .052 cents each. Using Armor's recommendation as a guide, Rusty decides to look into cheaper VCI. So he went online, did a little research, and found that he could save around 7 to 10%, or $8,112 initially. So Rusty decides to go with the cheap VCI to save the company some money. What Rusty doesn't know are the cold hard facts on VCI. Fact: not all VCI is the same. Fact: many VCI products don't work well. Fact: some work well in direct contact with metal, but not in a vapor phase. Fact: most applications require both direct contact and vapor phase. Fact: if you think you're saving 10% on a low-priced VCI product but have a rust issue, think again. But unfortunately, Rusty doesn't know this information. He walks into his boss's office to deliver the good news on all the money that'll save because of his cheap VCI solution. And they all live happily ever after. Right? Wrong. Now let's pause it, fast forward a few months into the future, and watch the true cost of cheap VCI add up. A few months later, an angry phone call comes into the customer service department, complaining about rust on their parts. The customer service department calls the sales manager. Then the sales manager calls Rusty. The entire communication of the rust complaint costs around $48, assuming an hourly burden rate of $24 for 2 hours. Now, an 8D meeting needs to be arranged to discuss the complaints and figure out a solution. These meetings usually consist of the quality manager, engineering, production, packaging engineer, and customer service. Let's assume an average salary and burden rate of $45 per hour times 5 hours for a total of $450. Now the cost of rust is up to $498. During this time, the rusty parts are being shipped back to Rusty's company. That's another $818, which includes transportation and shipping/receiving personnel costs. Now our total cost of rust is up to $1,316. Once the rusty parts are returned, they have to be inspected. So let's assume 2 people will do this at a $22 hourly rate plus burden for 2 hours. This totals $88. Do you see a pattern here? The cost of rust is now $1,404. And we're not done. Once the parts have been inspected, another 8D meeting is held. Yep, you guessed it, consisting of a quality manager, engineering, production, packaging engineer, and customer service. So now the total cost of rust is $1,854. During the meeting, it was decided that it'd be better to rework the rusty parts rather than scrapping them. Assuming a 75% rejection rate, to scrap the parts would be $24,000. To rework each part would cost $7,500, assuming it would take 1 minute per part for a total of 375 man hours. Our cost of rust total now, $9,354. Now that the parts are cleaned, they have to be delivered back to the customer. Yep, another $818 for delivery, and again, including those transportation and shipping/receiving personnel costs, which brings the total cost of rust up to $10,172. And of course, during this whole time, there's been constant communication with the customer. We can assume an average salary and burden rate of $50 per hour times 4 hours for $400. Keep in mind that the salary cost is not taking into account the loss of new business because of all the time and resources spent on this complaint. Rusty now has to go back to his boss to deliver the bad news. So what did Rusty learn? Armor products cost $81,120. Cheap VCI cost $73,008. Or did it? The perceived savings were $8,112, 7 to 10%. But we know now the actual cost of rust was $10,572. And this is only for one incident. Maybe it's 1 out of 52 shipments for the year. But what if this happens 2, 3, 4, or 5 times a year? It gets worse. That number doesn't include opportunity cost, scrap cost, or reputation cost, which in the end, cost the most. Don't take a risk on rust. It's easier to explain price once than apologize for quality forever. Make the right decision and protect your parts and your reputation with Armor Protective Packaging. For more information about Armor Protective Packaging and how we can protect your parts from rust, visit our website at www.armorvci.com.
All right, let me bring the screen back. So if that's a video that you would like to be able to share with anyone, feel free just to write in that question box to Ryan, hey, send me the link to the video, and we will get it sent right out to you. One of the things that I want to cover before we hop off the webinar for our last couple minutes is our Stock and Ready program. So if you're not familiar with our Stock and Ready program, we have 3 times the inventory of products that are in stock and ready to ship out to you with no order minimums, and Stock and Ready orders that are placed by 1 p.m. will they ship out to you or your customers next business day. We've made pricing incredibly simple. And again, what we have for you are those rustimonials. So if, as the video was going on, if you thought of a customer, or if you thought of like, oh, I've got this rust issue, I wonder if they have a rustimonial on that, feel free to type that in that question box to Ryan. Don't worry about writing down our website. I will send this out to you in an email after this webinar, but we have our website at armorvci.com. If you enjoyed that video, one I always try and plug during a webinar is our corporate video. So hop on there and take a peek at our corporate video. At this time, what I want to do for our last about 2 minutes or so is open it up to questions. So questions that we've seen come in during this webinar and other questions. Go ahead, Ryan.
Thank you, Kristen. Thank you to everybody who's on the webinar this morning for taking a half hour with us. Hope you learned thing or two and got to know a little bit more about VCI in general, and specifically Armor VCI. So one of the things we like to do on these webinars is to send a sweet swag bag to anybody on this webinar that wants one. And so that'll probably include maybe an Armor t-shirt, maybe an Armor hat, maybe an Armor coffee mug, and then some of the literature on some of the stuff that we talked about today as well. So if you could, in the question box, put your physical address in there. And if you're like Kristen and I, almost a year into the pandemic, still working at home, put your home address in there, and we'll get it to your home address so we know that you will have it. This is the first webinar we've done on this topic on off-brand VCI. So we don't have any previous questions coming through, but if you could, please put your questions in the question box on anything that you've seen today. And if I do not get to it right now, you can also add it in the feedback section, and then somebody on the Armor team will follow up with you. So I see some addresses coming through here. We'll definitely get those swag bags out. If there's anything that we can help with on the rust prevention side, or taking a look at one of your customers or one of your applications right now where you are thinking about using an off-brand VCI or are currently using an off-brand VCI, we'd love to have that discussion. Again, thank you again for taking 30 minutes with us. We're done a minute early, and I'll turn it back over to Kristen.
Yes, so just to reiterate what Ryan had said to you, this is our first time doing this topic. So when I close out the webinar, there's going to be a survey that pops up. 1's the lowest, 5's the best. We'd love for you to rate it and then give us any feedback or any other topics that you want to learn about. That's how we started doing this webinar, because enough people had mentioned they wanted to learn about the real cost of rust. So again, from myself and from Ryan, thank you and have a wonderful day. Bye now.